Andrew, welcome to Leading in the Dark.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So you are the president of Moosylvania. I'm going to have to ask about that name, but tell us, what is Moosylvania and what was your path to becoming the president there?
Yeah, we're a full service ad agency here in St. Louis. The name actually comes from Rocky and Bullwinkle. If anybody's a fan of the show, the writer actually tried to get the 51st state in America called Moosylvania, went around the country getting signatures in the 60s. Died trying, but was one of the first marketers to go experiential with his business and really get people thinking about a new place, which is where Bullwinkle was from, called Moosylvania. So when my father started the business 21 years ago, he went independent and thought there's no better way to bring back a great story than be Moosylvania. A lot of people just call us Moose, but my path to presidency has been interesting. I actually sold one of my dad's businesses at 23. It was a focus group company and kind of left myself without a job, not knowing where to go next. Joined the agency and was a copywriter and a community manager for a long time. Built a social department, which was a huge piece of my success. And where I'm at now is a lot of social media stuff that we do, but took control of the operation about 5 or 6 years ago and just led into the presidency role after continuing to evolve our value proposition. Marketing is so complicated. It changes every day. So being on the cusp of what we're doing next was a huge piece for me and has continued to help me even today figure out what we're going to do next. And that's part of the role that you have to have at this kind of position.
Andrew, this is really interesting to me because I have not yet talked with somebody that comes from a family business. I came from a family business background, so we probably have some good stories we could share.
For sure.
So when you joined Moosylvania, it sounds like you're still relatively early in your career. Did you know that you were going to be on a path to potentially take it over?
No, I think at some points I wondered if I was going to go elsewhere because of the current roster and what we already had mapped out. I think what's interesting about my path was I never really had this game plan to come in and run a family business. That totally changed when we were taking a class together, me and my father. I went to Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts for an MBA. One of the classes was grow a family business. And so we said to each other, wouldn't it be interesting if we took that class and saw what happened? And the teachers were father and son, and they convinced everybody in the class that you should work with your families. And here's the reasons why, which some do. Some find it successful, some don't. And that led to us just really carving a path for me to come into the business to figure some things out, but it was never a clear succession path to the top. And a lot of my success has come by way of proving results and seeing how I can work with the team. And it's been a really interesting journey with me and my father. And I think it's not been something that was just laid in stone and I just walked the path. So it's been a really different kind of course, but one I'm very grateful for.
What were some of those reasons that those teachers were saying that you should work with family in business?
Great question. The teachers talked about how obviously there's a factor of trust. You can go to the ends of the earth for each other, and that's something that you can't get with just a normal person in a relationship. And I think that was a huge piece of the beginning of the workshop. They talked a lot about strengths and weaknesses between the parent and the son or the parent and the daughter, and how some of the things that the parent has is innate to that individual that's like in their blood, they're the same, but also a lot of the reasons why they are who they are is because they're different than their parent. And those pluses and minuses are very important to looking at business differently. For instance, as we've gone through the process, my father and I, how I look at culture and employees and teammates, what I'm thinking about for them as a 36-year-old, much different than a 70-year-old, being in part of the culture with this audience, especially in marketing, been institutional to our development and our change. While I think for him, not just from an age perspective, but from a generation perspective, just totally a different look at the world and how you should work and where you should work and all those things. And so the teacher went back and forth with what are your strengths and weaknesses as individuals and where do you have overlap, but also where do you have polar opposite? And that actually might be really good for you all long term is to have both of those things in the room. So it was a very convincing workshop, I'll say that to say the least.
Did they also cover some pitfalls of family working together to be careful about?
Not as much as you probably should, I'll tell you that much. I think they focused on just entertaining the idea. It was a 2-day workshop. A lot of the businesses that we discussed during the room were international businesses. A lot of students were international. So a lot of it was family dynamic. As I've continued with consulting to almost some of the succession planning and therapy that we've basically done, there are a lot of negatives and it is hard, especially as you grow up into something and expect some things and that's not how it goes. or the business doesn't exactly go the right way. So there's a lot of things that you will find in the path of family business that are not super easy. And I just met a guy the other day, the CEO of Caravis, and he was fantastic about his father-son relationship and how they've gone. Everybody has a different story. And so it's a really kind of unique thing to have in my pocket and kind of think about as I help other people.
Do you have siblings?
I have one brother. He lives in New York. He's not in the business, and he is as creative as all get up. He's a good third party for both me and my dad. He's a voice of truth and has no stake in the game. And he's a wonderful brother. And it also has helped, I think, our relationship is it probably wouldn't be the same as if we were fighting for it every day in the same spot.
Yeah. I'm curious if you can share more detail about these generational differences and the culture that results in the business. Can you share more about that?
Absolutely. First off, you have to look back at COVID and say, wow, what a shocker it was to the total work environment that we've all adapted in our own way versus even our company's way. Going 5 days a week in a creative business was absolutely necessary. And then restricting that in a way and saying, when are we going to go back and how are we going to go back has been a major change in every ad agency around the country. I think the biggest holding company ad agencies are having petitions about returning to work a certain amount. And individuals in our company are creative by nature. That's who they are. That's why they joined our team. And creatives don't know boundaries. They don't know how to set them, and they don't really like policy. And so generationally, I think there's been the stigma that when my father was here pre-COVID, it was, you don't leave until he leaves. That's the way you look at it. Your boss is sitting there, you're sitting there. And now everybody being remote, the flexibility that they're granted and the trust that they have, both in myself and in their own role, is just completely different to that generational difference. And when me and my dad go to talk about things, it's almost as if he's shocked that this is how this is working. And I think that's just one aspect of generational difference. I think advertising in general allows a ton of generational difference. TikTok to what was popular in his day and the things that are completely different. The phone itself is so dynamic. Your cell phone is everything in today's world. And I think as a business person with sales and some version of whatever you do, you're like, no, you go meet people, you shake their hand, you talk to them on the phone, you do the things, and that's how you do it. And now we could just email each other and do whatever. So that I think is just wherever you can find the overlap between your generation and the one that you're talking to is a win. Because I think it just creates a really nice, I see you, we could be different, but we can figure things out. And that has been really helpful for me, is to have someone in a different generation and how they think in my ear, because I play into that card when I need to.
So are you fully remote now?
We're not. We're a couple days a week in the office, and I'm here today. We have about 45 here in St. Louis. 2 days a week, people come in too, and sometimes in between. We shoot a lot of content, so people are here a lot to do that job. People like the flexibility, but they really like the autonomy. And I think that is something hard to give and take back and give and take back. We were 1 day a week, and then we moved to 2 days a week. And I think if you talk about 3 days a week, all of a sudden that's becoming too much. Everybody has a feeling about where they should be. And I try to go back to everybody gets to be an individual, but at the same time, we're all on the same team. And so what's best for the team is where we have to go. And that's made a lot of our decisions as of late. And I think people respect it. They might not love the first thing for themselves, but they understand that the team is bigger than the individual. And that's what makes really great companies. That's what makes really great teams.
You're partially describing the answer to my next question, but I agree with that approach. The way I verbalize it is, I want to hire adults, treat them like adults. I don't worry about whether you're sitting at your desk at 5 p.m., but we have to get things done still. So how do you manage that, giving people the freedom and autonomy, but also setting high expectations and holding the line in the sand?
It's a great point, and it's really difficult. The way I do it is I've continued to look at the key managers that I have and say, I'm putting a responsibility on you. And that responsibility is that you're a key manager and that I have an opinion if that person's killing it or doing great or they're not pushing their weight, but you're the kind of the real token of truth. You're the person I'm trusting to check in with that person at 5 o'clock, make sure they're hitting their deliverables. You're the person caring for their work and helping them grow. And so I lean in on them about their individuals and ask them the tough questions when tough questions have to be asked. It's never an easy thing because everyone's got their own stuff going on. Like even the manager has their own life going on. But I look at it and I say, that's why that's the seat for that person. And if that doesn't really work for them as a manager, we work on a different rule then. Let's change the team up. Let's figure out who's better for you, because it should be easy for you to have that level of transparency with your individuals, and they should respect you and then respect me in the same ways. And so I'm not having to cross that line and say, hey, are you online right now? Are you doing XYZ? In a creative business, everything's really subjective. So really tough to say, am I getting it done? It could be done 100 ways. And so it's a lot about how the clients are receptive to their work, how the team is receptive to that individual. And the mixture of that is what plays into my heart, not just the manager's take, because everybody, again, has their own opinion. That's what we're built on, right? Subjectivity. So I try to keep it as neutral of a stance across the board and take all the information back to make my key decisions at the end of the day.
I'm curious just because what you all do is so very different than anything I've done and probably very different than my personality. Like, what's the day in the life of a creative person in a business like yours?
It's funny because it goes back to, are they there at 8:30 when the workday starts? Like, they might be there at 9:15 with a cup of coffee. Like, they're coming in however they need to be fulfilled creatively. They start, I think most everybody checks email, but we have a ton of brainstorming and team-based thinking throughout our days. So whether we're in person or remote, we're usually solving a problem together. The majority of the day, if you're on the creative side, more on the art and the copy side, you're making content. You're making emails and websites and social posts, and you're thinking about all those things and how they work constantly. So we use a program called Figma. That's where you kind of lay all the stuff out. We're constantly tinkering with something that is an actual creative post. All that communication is where they live. And as an account person, your job is to help facilitate that, teach the client about what we think is going well, how they interpret that as well, and then keep passing back and forth that information with strategic clarity. And depending on the role that you're in, you're going to have a really fun, brainstormy, creative day, or you might be more in the, hey, we're in the project world. Let's get A to B and B to C and C to D. And that's part of the role that you play. And the good part is everybody gets a chance to throw down. There's never a dull day here where you can't get into a room and be creative. So we try and allow that to be, no matter who you are, from accounting and HR to a top creative director, we'll take your idea and see where it goes.
I think you mentioned that you will sometimes do these creative brainstorming sessions virtually. That seems like it might be a challenging thing to do. Do you use any special techniques or tools that allow you to be creative online?
We actually have been building a game. It's coming out soon. It's called Collabsurdity. It's a brainstorming game. It's an icebreaker game. We're building it both digitally and physical cards. It's like Cards Against Humanity. We have about 10 different brainstorm exercises that we go through depending on the challenge. One of them is called Let's Get Fired. Let's think about the craziest stuff that would not go well with the client. And there's different exercises depending on the challenge that we go into. And what typically happens in a good brainstorm is that somebody's coming in with homework or some version of what are we trying to get out of it. And with that, you can really do it digitally now more than ever with the ability to chat and break into rooms and do the different stuff. Is it more fun to do it in person? It depends. I think so. But it's capable to do it digitally. And I think that the end result of a brainstorm is, what did we really get down that's usable? Because did we just go in the room for an hour, and whether it was online or in person, or did we come back with something that we actually can sell? And so typically that's a benchmark of, was it good? Not where it was, but how did it end up? And so a lot of that falls on our creative department. And I think they do a really good job of that job. Getting it to the client and having them buy off is much harder than having fun with the creative ideas. I'll tell you that.
Is this game you're developing something that's only for internal use or something you're going to share with clients?
That's another great question. We are going to be selling it on e-commerce in a couple of months, but it is a client tool as well. And it's really we actually used to play this game, which we still do, called the napkin game. We take a brand and everybody in the whole company gets a couple minutes to write down ideas about the brand and come up on the stage and tell us about what you thought about. 60 seconds or less, literally on a napkin or a digital napkin, and you get to pitch it. And so we took the iterations of that and started thinking about, how do you quickly throw down an idea without overthinking it so that someone could build off of it and get the juices flowing? Because that's really when we get a lot of good brainstorming, is when you get something to work off of. It's not always the biggest idea comes from one person. So the game is coming in physical in June or July, digitally in about a month. And it'll be a really fun thing to give clients to mess with, and other people can play on their own.
I'm curious, how do you manage like egos of creative people? Do people like, hey, my idea is the best? And do you get into those types of situations?
We do. I think anybody does who lives in this business. Two things I think are the rules of thumb. One, you try to pair people that are successful together. And that's part of it. You try not to put two alpha egos in the same spot. And so you do that very thoughtfully and strategically about how you build your teams and who's doing what. And then when push comes to shove and there's ideas and everybody's got an opinion, really, we lean on the person who's closest to the client. And we say, hey, what is that client like? What do they think about? What makes them happy? You're the voice of truth, even if not the creative person. That's more in an account role because people are people, right? And they like what they like. And so the best creative idea can land totally flat on the wrong person, or it can kill it depending on who it's being sold to. And also, who's the voice in their ear that's the person they trust. So we lean on those two factors of picking the right teams, but also understanding client personality is key to winning ideas. And so we try and make sure that whatever the best idea is really what's best for the client in the situation, not what's actually the most clever or the biggest.
And do you focus on a certain type of client?
We've been in the beverage world for our whole 21 years. We actually turned 21 in October. We launched a beer with four hands called Moose Space. Pretty cool. We built it from the ground up. They sold it at retail at Whole Foods and Schnucks and Deerbergs, and they sold it on their on-premise locations. It was at bars around St. Louis. We've been in beverage and alcohol for all 21 years. We also have been heavily involved in fintech, finance. We work with Venmo and PayPal, as well as in tobacco. And a lot of people ask if we should be in marijuana. We always would like to be. Who doesn't in the creative business? But we've been in vices our whole kind of life. That's been a key thing, but we're really proficient at retail. Driving a lot of retail. We still have production, all the digital stuff that's happening in the world. We still do a lot of print stuff. And that's been a really big game changer for us is that when it comes to having a product not just being sold online, but at a physical location, we know how to get it in front of people and we know how to get it to sell. So that's been a big kind of core KPI and thing that we've been good at for a long time.
I'd love to hear more about that because beverages is one of those industries that you hear is just hyper competitive. You're not going to get shelf space. Like, how in the world are you going to distinguish your brand when it's potentially saturated or however you want to describe it? So what do you do to really make people successful?
So it usually starts with how successful a sales organization is in a retail driven conversation because salespeople drive the business. They drive the distributor, they drive the wholesaler, they drive the situation on the actual retail itself. Salespeople drive a ton. What we're really good at is having a conversation with both marketing and sales and making sure that we can do something that makes both parties really happy. I just had this conversation yesterday with a client. Salespeople look at the world and go, I don't know that influencer or that celebrity or whoever it is. I know X, Y, and Z. Okay, if they go in and they don't know that individual, they're not going to sell that product into the shelf well at all. They need something that they can sell. So we have to work in tandem of saying, how's your sales organization built? Who's doing well? You're not going to get on the shelf if you don't have salespeople. And so how can we work them together with your marketing thoughts to make sure that it has excitement from the marketing eyes, but actual true value from the salesperson's eyes? And a lot of the salespeople we work with sell a lot of different products, right? They're not just selling one thing usually. And so how does it stand out so that you can push product A instead of product B? Salespeople are key to business. They've been, they will always be. And I think as a marketer, we've accepted how important they are to the game. And again, another subjective voice in the room is really tough if you look at it that way. But if you look at it from the other side, they're the one with all the power when push comes to shove on getting it into the actual shelf. And that's a really important person to have in your corner, thinking the same way as you are. And I would say is a secret to success of winning at shelf is knowing your salespeople and knowing how they think so that you can make sure that they are set up for ultimate success.
So what's working these days in marketing? You mentioned very early on that things change rapidly, right? So I think Google's algorithm recently changed, right? You can't do email blasts anymore. That stuff doesn't work. Like what is working these days?
It depends on the industry and the business. I think if you sell things directly, there's a couple of different ways to go about it versus if you sell through retail channels. What's working in general, I would say, is if you have customers, you need to do a couple of things. One, you need to say, what's your point of difference? Why are you different than everybody else? Because there's probably a lot of competitors now. If you're doing something well, there's 1,000 competitors. So what are you doing differently? Really, is it being clear enough to the customer that you are doing things differently? Secondarily, after you look at competitive advantage, it's saying, okay, great. And who is your audience really clearly, because you could be really great at something and be different, but your audience is not really on the same page as you. They're in some other idea. They don't need that or they don't want that. So we look at audience and point of differentiation. And lastly, we look at loyalty, the people who actually do love you. And what are you doing for them? A lot of our success and a lot of marketing success comes from looking at loyalty metrics and understanding your core consumer at the highest level and saying, they are your biggest fan. Who are they and why do they love you? Because you should probably love them back. At this point, a lot of brands, to me, look for another new person because they think that's going to create this ripple. And I look at, no, look at the person who loves you because they'll help you more than you ever imagined. So to me, loyalty and point of difference is game changing in a world that's got a million things to look at and mess around with and multitask and blah, blah, blah. Loyalty, meeting your target audience and your point of difference, those are the keys to true success.
Loving your customers back is an interesting comment, or loving your fans back. What does that look like in reality?
I honestly think that a lot of companies need to give more. I'm a big fan of Chipotle. Everybody who likes Chipotle is a fan of Chipotle. They used to do mini games on their app that were like, whack the avocado and the onion in this and make guac, like pick which ones are in the guacamole and whatever you win, free chips and guacamole. You know what it costs to get them chips and guacamole? What does it cost to get them in the door for a $14 burrito now? Like, you're doing things that are small to make the consumer feel attached to your brand and feel like they won something, feel like it's been worth their time to engage with you. And so often I feel like these brands forget that giving somebody a small token leads to a big opportunity. And if you're afraid to give, you're not going to get. And I think that's where loyalty hits the road. Is that's why they're loyal, is because you're willing to give them something back. I feel like forever there was a punch card of eat 9 subs, get the 10th one free. You know what? That's really not that hard to think about. It's really not that crazy to say, give me all your feedback for a $100 gift card. Like, those are really basic mentalities that teach you a lot and make the customer feel very valued. Lean in, spend $1 to make 100. That's kind of part of so much of what I think people forget is they're your customer. Don't abuse it. Don't lose it. Lean into them and help them out and give them something back for being your customer. That's why they'll stay with you. And I think that's a rule of life. And hopefully people look at that and say, that's how I should be looking back at my core people is what can I give them? Not what do they do for me tomorrow?
Everything you just described, is this what you go through in the discovery process with your clients?
Very much. We go through discovery, specifically looking at their loyalty and who they've got and who they want to get, and talk a little bit about prioritization of how to spend some money and make the right stuff. Everybody loves a piece of content. I'll tell you, 12-year-old loves Instagram as much as a 70-year-old loves Instagram. It is like everyone could spend every hour of their day sitting on TikTok. They could, and it would do nothing for anybody. It would just waste the world. I think everybody wants to do that and not do the real work of true discovery of Google Analytics, meaning where your customers are sold or your sales team XYZ. You'd rather talk about a video because it's entertaining. And I think that's part of discovery is going, it's not just about that. It's about some of the nuts and bolts that we actually need to clean up. Like, how is your data being collected? Is the system you're using helpful? Are you learning anything from that system? Do you have Google Analytics? Have you looked at them? Blah, 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 blah. The things that are dry teach you a lot more than the let's go look at a video and talk about it. So we sell a lot of the video, let me tell you. But I think it's discovery is really rooted in actually learning something non-subjective. And that is really crucial to success early on. A lot of clients struggle to set goals because it is a complicated world. And we hope to set them with each other and say, this is what we're really aiming for. So that at the end of the day, we've taken some subjectivity away or have some objectivity to the wins that we can make and the progress that we can do, because it's not going to happen overnight either. So those are key facets of discovery, is setting some right expectation and digging in on the dirt.
If you don't mind, I want to go back to the family business aspect a little bit. Do you use like a formal board or an advisory board or outside consultants that kind of help you walk through this transition?
We have. They haven't been overly successful. What I will tell you about what I've learned about family business is when you are the person who takes all the risk, if you're the parent, you take all the risk, there's very little reward. It's your boat. You want to just give your boat away? No. You want to just hand it off? No. You want some other person who's never been on your boat to tell you about that boat? Definitely not. It is really complicated to get someone who takes the risk to give up all the reward. And for that, I would say parents have a relationship with their child, and that's totally different than an owner running a business with a partner or an employee. And separating those types of people and like the person you need to be in certain rooms, it's helpful to have a board. It's helpful to have advisors. It's helpful to have key employees that you can also learn a lot from. I feel like all of those things are crucial. For me, it hasn't been the easiest road. It's not one I would change, but it has been not due to a ton of resources that have been influential in our decision making. It has been a lot of father-son conversations over and over again, seeing if we can continue to see each other for who we are. For better or for worse, it's been my journey and his too. And I think we look at each other differently now than we did maybe 5 years ago and even 10. And at the end of the day, I don't think I changed a thing, and I don't think he would either. I think it's part of your decision making. And my dad likes to say, this is the business that we chose. And it's true. I chose it too, just as much as he did when he took all the risks. So here we are, and we still try to find some common ground a lot to kind of balance that out of how intense it can get as just the two of us.
It's amazing that you're able to have those conversations, right? Because in many of these intergenerational transitions, they can't have the conversation.
Again, it hasn't been easy. I think as a mature adult, 30-year-old Andrew is different than 36-year-old Andrew with 2 kids. And you look at the world differently every time you either have a kid or you think about it being a child and a parent. Each time you learn from the negative, I think a lot more than the positive. And I've had plenty of fights. I've been at plenty of dinner tables where we're talking about the wrong things. And again, you try and set some more boundaries for each other. But at the end of the day, if you're the person who really did all the work to start, you never let go. And in one way or another, it's impossible. You put everything you had into this thing. So I look at it and I go, he'll never be done because it's a part of who he is at this point. He's invested too much of it and he couldn't be anything without it. In a way, it's his identity. And so I try more now to let that be and let it just be okay than I have. And I think it's a very challenging situation for every parent and their child. Some people wouldn't change it for the world and others might really struggle with it. But I will tell you that there's eventually light at the end of every tunnel and you'll get there. Sometimes a harsh decision has to be made to get there too. Maybe it's an exit and maybe it's not the right time for you to continue to go after it. So it's a struggle, but again, one that you've got to be grateful for because you got set up for success, right? That's usually part of it.
Is your father coming to the office frequently?
He lives in Miami 7 months a year, but when he's back, he does. And we don't have offices. Everybody has open floor plans. So he's got a nice space that I look at a lot. I go past going, that would be a nice desk for me. But I don't ask. I know it's not for me. He comes back and he loves the people. The people is who he misses and how he gets to interact with them. I think being remote for a few years and hybrid now, he doesn't see he's missing the tangential conversation. So he really loves being back and seeing the people work because I think it makes him happy in more ways than one.
One of the themes you hear when a younger generation enters the family business is you have to outwork everybody, right? You have to be there longer hours. You can't come in here acting all entitled and all that type of stuff. Was that your experience?
I've never outworked anybody. I feel like I've outsmarted my whole life. I've gotten really lucky at figuring out how the line works and where I can get in. For me, I never looked at I need to be here at 5:31 if he's here, if he leaves at 5:30. I looked at it like, what do I deliver? That's what I really want to know. Do I deliver when the things happen? Do I find us a new client? Do I sell better work? Am I more profitable? Is the operation savvier? Have I taken a person that did one job and teach them 2 jobs? That's how I judge my success, is not on time, but on some version of result. And when we look at data and dollars, that's how I determined if I was winning. And I think a lot of people with their parent, especially, you feel this stress that you're not doing enough. You feel like you need to go do more. And especially in a creative business, it feels like you're never done. Like I'm up thinking at midnight all the time. What's going on here? What's that? Outworking somebody has been something that in a creative business has shown me that just putting time in doesn't equal success. And so at some point early on, I gave up that road of I'll just be here longer and do more. And I thought to myself, what if I think more about what I'm making? And if it takes me 2 hours today or 12, let's see what the results are and how it changes the team and the company and the clients. And that's really going to make or break us.
I don't want to turn this into a therapy session for either one of us, but did your measure of success match with your father's expectations? Because I certainly have seen where you could work 1 hour a day, make $1 million in sales a day, but if you're not here till 7 o'clock at night, I don't really care.
It's a great comment. Success is obviously in the eye of the beholder, right? That's very true. For him, he definitely struggles with the hours and the time commitment as his grade of success. I look at it and say, hey, I could be physically there for you all day long. Let's look at the dollars and the cents and the return on investment for you. And over time, consistency of winning in that argument has helped me tremendously. At first, it didn't really, you're lucky. This is all set up for you. Don't worry, like it'll go bad. All these things came into play where it was like, I don't believe that. That's not good enough. I need you to work harder. And then over time, the answer was, it is working and it's showing me that it's working. And it's not about if he was there or not there and all these things. And I think he still struggles if you're not. And I think for me, again, I look back and I say, he gets to be creative when he goes on a walk with his dog. That's how he thinks. You need to clear your head. That's important to the game. And so if it means that you're not at the desk at every second of every day grinding, it might actually be more helpful for the human being and doesn't mean that they have to sit there to think. That might actually be something that, again, as a leader and as an owner and as a son and as a president, all these things that have to somewhat make sense for other people too. And so I try not to judge someone just on the time they spend, but on their output. And I think over time, you'll win the argument if you're successful. If you're not, get back to work and see what else you can do.
It's interesting you mentioned the walk. So my wife and I, we both worked in a family business. It's a different business in this one. And she's incredibly intelligent and she worked in business development, basically sales, right? She would go for long walks because like your father, that's how she was creative and she could put all the pieces of the puzzle together for the account she was trying to land. And then she would come back and win. She was very successful at this, but not being at your desk was more the measure than did you land the client.
It's really interesting. There's a guy in the marketing strategy world named Rashad Tabakawala. He's a chief strategy officer for a long time. He just wrote a book called Rethinking Work. His whole philosophy is, while everybody says go back to the office, you're losing like all this opportunity of doing all the things that actually might help you win. And so physical work actually, I think, leads to this mental grind that you need to physically be somewhere. Honestly, fresh air and how you get to process has been scientifically proven to be helpful. So if everybody can take a beat from let's get up and move around a little bit, even if it's at home or walking somewhere, it will change your life a little bit because you'll almost, if you start doing it, then you're more okay with other people doing it too. And I think that has changed my father's approach for a long time is he would do it and then he'd go to work. And now if he does it in the middle of the day, he finds himself more successful at the end of the day. And I said, hey, that's case in point, right? You like to do it twice a day. Look what happens to you. You get to think again and refresh. And that's really important for you. That wouldn't happen if you're just chained to the desk all day. So we try and take that, again, generational culture overlap and say, there is a little bit of okayness of letting it all be and watch what happens and don't overreact to it and see if someone gets better by going to take their dog for a walk in the middle of the day.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely on that point. I kind of like to try to summarize these conversations with the following question, and it's a really simple one. If you could provide one insight on leadership that you would want people to take away from this discussion, what might that be?
Try and find objective measures in your business, especially around leadership, that you can lean on when things hit the fan, because it is really difficult to lead. It is really difficult to have pressure. It's hard to do everything when things aren't going well. And so having a few objective kind of thoughts, points, having a really great team that can give you clarity or feedback is overly necessary to the journey. And from my perspective, you can be high on this roller coaster for years and it can come down very quickly. Leadership is a mixture of making a tough decision, standing for what you believe in, taking way more risk than you probably want to, and believing in yourself, right? If you can't have the confidence internally, it's going to be tough for you. And so at night when I struggle, you have a partner, and my wife is a great one, where I ask her the questions and she looks back at me and says, you can do this. I know you can. And it helps to have that in the times of vulnerability. So I think even as a young person and whoever you are listening to it, who is your person? It could be your brother, it could be your mother, it could be your partner, it could be your wife, your husband. Like all these people are available. It'd be your friend. Don't be afraid to hit them up when you're at that bottom point, because it will happen eventually, and use some of that to re-inspire what you can and can't do. Because at the end of the day, everybody in leadership has inflection points, and they really will have that moment if they're doing the right things, if it's working, if it's not. So the more objective and the more circle you can build around yourself and smart people that you can talk to, the better you'll be.
That's a great summary. And leadership is lonely. So you need that anchor support system, whatever it is. You got to have one or you're going to get lost real fast. Andrew, I appreciate you being willing to share some insights into family business.
Sure.
I find it fascinating. Always have.
Love to talk about the good and the bad. Happy to. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me on.